Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about getting laid off slash fired. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, could you make a video about getting laid off and or fired? Well, I can. So I wrote back to the subscriber because this was a little bit loose for me because it's a pretty big topic, getting fired or losing your job or things like that. And so I wrote back and I asked, I have a few videos on this topic. What is it that you want to know? And so the subscriber replies and says, underperformance, self-doubt, embarrassment, internationalization, next job, what to do, etc. So not much more clear about specifics here. So we're gonna have to I'm gonna have to go wide, which unfortunately for you guys means that it's very likely that you're not gonna get much value out of this, but I'll give it a bash anyway. So the argument I've made in a few videos related to being fired and so forth, because it is something that I've done more than once in my career, is that you, regardless of if it's getting fired, it is any type of crisis, guys. Literally any crisis that you can imagine. You only ever have two choices, and that is to stay where you are or get moving somewhere. Doesn't matter where. These are the only two options you ever have in life. And as I've said to a few people who's asked me about this, who sort of bring up the circumstances for their situation, where they tell me that they had a rough upbringing, they don't have a lot of money, etc., etc. And all I can ever say to them is that my heart goes out to all of you, and I wish the world was a better place than it is. And trust me, there are millions upon millions of people who suffer unnecessarily every single day. And I promise you, the second the world leaders all gather around in a room and say, hey, you know what, we're gonna make Frederick, let him call the shots, I will take care of all of that, or I will try, unless I go crazy with power, but I will try to fix it. But until that point, the reality is that suffering is not going anywhere. It's going to continue. And the facts are, if you look at the world, most people don't give a shit about that suffering, because it's not something they have to care about. And most of us are, we're humans, guys. It's not possible for you to physically feel the same sensations and emotions for someone's misfortunes that you don't know or you don't interact with, as with someone who you actually connect with. Some people are really big-hearted and can really go the extra mile, but on average, guys, you are on your own. And that sucks in a way, but that doesn't mean that there are not nice people who are going to help you. But in order for you to get that help, you have to start helping yourself first and foremost. So what I like to tell people is that don't try to pretend like you're not going through a crisis. Don't try to shy away from the emotions and the sensation of overwhelming failure and self-doubt and all that stuff. Create a coping mechanism. It's similar to how I have another video where I talk about that, where I say to people that one of the best investments that you can make for yourself is to create a life situation where you have the option of walking away. Always. The reason why that is so powerful is because if you have something to latch on to when shit hits the fan, and for preppers that is having a bunker somewhere, for other people it might be having savings, etc., etc. It is just your bedrock, your foundation, your thing that makes you feel like, yeah, things are probably not gonna go all the way to like the worst case scenarios, right? That coping mechanism, it can be anything. For me, it is, the classic one. When I get depressed, I lie in bed and I watch television until the feeling goes away. For other people, like my girlfriend, she went through when her grandfather passed away a few years ago. She had a really rough time and she just watched some television, did some knitting, things like that. There are all these sorts of techniques that don't make sense, and that's the thing, guys. We live in an age, and I think it is overall a good thing that we live in a more scientifically minded age, but suffering and pain and what makes you feel better is not something we have sort of figured out, and you don't have to justify it to anybody when you're going through a crisis. Just do the thing that helps, regardless of what that is, and continue doing that, because you're now in sort of support mode. It's sort of like your respirator or something like that, where you're just trying to get through the day. And I promise you that after a while of coping with the sensation, time will do the thing that time always does, and it heals all wounds. You may not fully, and I'm not saying that everything's going to work out just because you let time pass. What I'm saying is that the sort of like a fresh wound, it will stop hurting as much. The thing that now is important is for you to understand, and this is what I tell people: if you look at hard times as temporary, they will always be temporary, because you have now realized that this is sort of like taking a break from a long run. You're tired, you have to rest, so rest, but don't sit there and never get up again. You have to just rest enough so that you can get back up and start moving in some direction. And trust me, guys, this self-doubt and underperformance and so forth, it's never going away. Never, ever. Unless you are truly the most arrogant person in the world, you will always feel some type of self-doubt and embarrassment and so forth for something. There's nothing you can do about it. The thing that you have to understand, guys, is that it really doesn't matter what you believe about yourself when it comes to employment and jobs and so forth. What matters is what other people believe about you in this regard. That doesn't mean that you should let people walk over you. I'm saying that if you feel like you're doing pretty poorly in one job or in one specific company, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the same situation in the next company, or the one after that, or the one after that, etc., etc., etc. And that's sort of the balancing act between well, there are two foundational principles that you really need in order to make it in anything, I would say. One part is that you have to be stubborn enough to actually continue your learning, to really put in the effort that is necessary to achieve the goals that you have. I've talked to a lot of people who say, oh, I learn part-time, or I do like some extra, how much do I have to invest, etc., etc. And I go, you're never going to make it. Never. Because unless you are extraordinarily fortunate and talented, doing programming part-time is never going to net you a real job. Or like you do it a little bit, like I have. They even tell me how many hours a month they put in, and I go, that's probably not going to be enough. Because the people who make it into this industry, they're usually people who invest quite heftily in order to become something. It's sort of like saying, like, I'm not saying it's much harder to become an actor, but I hope that you see my point where you say, oh, I'm just part-timing this actor thing and that's probably going to work out. And some people absolutely make it on part-time because of luck and connections and talent and all of this good stuff, right? But for the average person, even if they put all their effort in, it's not a given thing that they're going to become an actor or something like that, or a famous person. And so for you, that is one part. You have to make the investment. You have to want this bad enough that you can survive a failure. It's sort of like a businessman who starts several companies and they go bankrupt, and then he starts one that actually works out. If you get deterred by failure, you're most likely not going to get it back up and start moving again. And the other part is that you have to understand that fear, self-doubt, all this sort of stuff, it is in your head. It's all in your head. And all it takes for you to stop feeling that way is to get a few successes under your belt. Most people are going to forget all their failures. If you put enough time and success between your failures and yourself, you won't even feel anything about them anymore. Guys, I've been fired from my first job. Well, technically I didn't get fired, but I would have been fired. And it sucked at the time, but I had already gotten another job which was even better than the first one. I don't even think about the first one anymore. I think they can, you know, it was probably the best thing that happened to me, and this has been a reoccurring theme in my life, that when I have failed, it sucked for a while. And then reflecting, looking back on it, it's always the same thing, guys, and it's the same thing you're going to hear from every single person who's older than you. And like, if you take the time to talk to senior citizens, they will tell you most of your failures, you're going to end up looking back on them and going, yeah, it was probably for the best, or yeah, maybe that wasn't as bad as you thought it was. But you have to follow those two rules. You have to invest, and you have to swallow the fear. That's the second part. And understand that it's all in your head, and continue churning. So what I want you to take away from this is that I firmly believe that the only solution, the only choices you have when you go through a crisis, it doesn't matter if it's being fired, getting laid off, or getting dumped, etc., etc., is that you can stay where you are, or you can continue moving. And usually I find that treating a crisis as a temporary break is the best way of dealing with it. It's the way that I've at least gotten through the crisis of my life, the crises I've had in my life, where when you're in your down period, when the curve goes down, you have to have invested in coping mechanism. Understand yourself. What will make you happy enough to not, you know, do something drastic or things like that? Because if you can survive the dip in your mood or your life situation through coping mechanisms. Some people need friends, some people go and do yoga, some people do like just lie in bed and watch TV, etc., etc. If you survive that dip, you can look at it as resting after exercising. You just need to catch your breath, and then you should start moving again. And then you do the thing that everybody who's ever achieved anything has to do. You have to swallow your pride, your fear, all of these sorts of things, and have those voices in your head who tells you that this is not gonna work, etc., etc., and then go and do it anyway. I promise you, that is the best move that you can possibly make after you survive the dip. Have a great day.